What's going on, YouTube? We're going to do a preview here of the 2020 Texas A&M Aggies, assuming that the season goes through with all that's going on right now, guys. Still not sure what's going to happen, but we do know that the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12 have not given up hope just yet. And so to start the season, the Aggies take on the Vanderbilt Commodores. Now, Vanderbilt, always a spunky squad, but they usually don't get the W. Those guys, they fight hard, but they usually don't come out on top. So this one's not really hard at all. The Aggies return the most combined offensive and defensive returning production in the SEC West, going against Vanderbilt. Not going to be tough for these guys. They're playing at home, Kyle Field, College Station, Texas. Going to go ahead and mark that one down as a W. So that's going to be 1 win, 0 losses. Next up, you've got the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, the Crimson Tide obviously have to replace their quarterback. Tua is an amazing talent, but it's Nick Saban, guys. And no surprise here if I were to pick Alabama to win, but I'm not gonna pick the Aggies to upset here. Even though I'm a Texas A&M fan and I am a little biased, I'm gonna go ahead and say that the Aggies lose this one. I think that Saban's too good of a coach, and I think that he'll have his boys ready, and that's gonna kind of trickle down. It's gonna cause something else to happen, and that is, even though you're playing them at home, Kyle Field, I don't see A&M winning this game. Every time that somebody loses to Alabama, there's a massive hangover. And when you lose that game, you're beat up going into that next game. You're playing these teams back-to-back. Now, granted, you do get to play at home, but still, coming off that Alabama game, there's not a whole lot of time in the season. I do like that A&M has a lot of returning production. I do think that these big games early gives them a chance to succeed, but I see them losing this game as well and heading into that Mississippi State game at 1-2. So, guys, we're moving a little bit quick here, but that's because these last two and the first one were pretty obvious picks for me. Now, this next one is really tough, and that's because of a guy named Mike Leach. Now, Mike Leach, we all remember, was at Texas Tech for the longest time before that closet incident with Craig James' kid, Adam James, and a lot of evidence to suggest that wasn't the correct decision by Texas Tech, that Mike Leach might not have been guilty. A lot of evidence to suggest that they should have never fired the guy. A lot of evidence to suggest that they owe him a lot of money for breach of contract for firing him without conclusive evidence. And I'm kind of on Mike Leach's side on that. I kind of believe that they owe him a lot of money and that they should pay up. Now, I may be out of date on what's gone on with that lawsuit. I don't know if they've paid him or not. All I know is that for the longest time, at least up until a couple of years ago, they still owed him a considerable amount of money. And someone had once joked about him going back to Texas Tech. That's not going to happen. On to the game. He is the king of the air raid, guys, so he's never out of it. His teams throw Hail Marys. His teams throw, 50-yard bombs. They spread the defense out. He's never out of the game. He can come back drastically in a very short period of time. And so it's really tough to count those guys out. And they're playing at home. They're playing at Davis Wade Stadium in Starkville, Mississippi. I know that there's not going to be a lot of fans in the stands, guys, but I do think that gives them a slight advantage. Playing at home probably gives them about a 3-point swing. I just don't think it's going to be enough, guys. I think that Jimbo Fisher is going to have the Texas A&M Aggies ready. Jimbo Fisher is going to go in to Starkville, and he's going to defeat the Mississippi State Bulldogs. I like Kellen Mond as a senior representing that team. He's been getting playing time since he was a freshman. You've got Isaiah Spiller, probably the most underrated running back coming back in the SEC. Might be a top 3 running back in the SEC this season. Rushed for nearly 1,000 yards last year and didn't even start till like the 3rd or 4th game of the season. I think a lot of people are sleeping on him. I think the Aggies have the best tight end talent in the conference with Jalen Weidermeyer and a guy that supposedly had beaten him out in the preseason last year before getting injured, a guy that a lot of people don't know about, Baylor Cupp. I think you see a lot of double tight end sets in this game, and I think that the Aggies pull off the W, probably win this one by about 10, and so that brings the Aggies to 2-2. So then you get a bye week before you play Arkansas. And what's interesting about this, guys, that has not happened in quite a while is that the game will be in College Station. Now, the game, if you remember, has always been, at least, for as long as I can remember, all the way back to maybe 1 year that Manziel was there, game has always been at Jerry World in Dallas. And Texas A&M has kind of dominated the series in Jerry World, except back when A&M was in the Big 12 and Arkansas had Ryan Mallett and their coach was Bobby Petrino. We all remember Bobby Petrino and his motorcycle incident. So this game is always close. Maybe 1 or 2 games not close in the past 7 years. A couple games gone to overtime. A lot of games ending in the 4th quarter on the last play. And A&M always seems to come out on top. I do like the Aggies in this one. I'm going to pick them to win it. It may not be by much. Arkansas, probably a really bad team this year, especially with the schedule that they have. Going into this game, I don't even care who they play. They're 4 to 5 games in, depending on when their bye week is. They've got to play somebody tough by this point. With how brutal that schedule is, I'd have to glance at it again, but they've got to have come off of some brutal game, and I don't see them pulling this one off. I think that Arkansas is going to take quite a beat down this season, and they'll be lucky to win 3 games this season. If they win 3 games, I will be surprised. Man. This game should be a good one. It's in South Carolina, and so that gives the Gamecocks a little bit of an advantage there. And I think a lot of people are sleeping on South Carolina this season. I think they're going to be a lot better. It's in November. It's getting close towards the end of the season, and Aggies are going to get to play Tennessee again for the 2nd time. They've always beaten South Carolina. And so it may be a game that you tend to overlook just because you've always beaten this team. And that's what kind of worries me is, you overlook this game thinking, hey, Tennessee's coming up next. At this point, in the season, Tennessee could be ranked. And if Tennessee is ranked, you're going into the South Carolina game, maybe thinking ahead. Might cause you to slip up here. But again, I think that A&M is going to beat a lot of teams this season that we've seen them slip up in the past. I like the Aggies to have a good season this season, and I'm going to go ahead and say the Aggies are 4-2 at this point. Maybe squeak out a 3-point victory in that one. All right, guys. I really struggled with this one. It's in Neyland, and, of course, A&M played these guys at home last time. If Kevin Sumlin was the head coach, I would say right now, Texas A&M wins this game. And I know that seems counterintuitive. They fired the guy, but if you guys follow Texas A&M football closely, you would have noticed something, and that is that Kevin Sumlin teams at A&M played extremely well on the road and not very well at home. In fact, it was kind of detrimental to the ticket sales for Texas A&M. They would win these big games. They won at Alabama. They won at Auburn. They won at Florida. And, they just continued to win these big games on the road, but they would not win at home. And Jimbo Fisher's kind of been the opposite, guys. He's won, against number 8, I believe, LSU, a team that finished number 11 in Kentucky one year, and then a number 25 was it a UAB, I believe? Might have been UAB. And so all of this guy's ranked wins, or at least for the most part, he might have some on the road, have pretty much come at home. And so if Tennessee's ranked in this game, man, that really makes this pick tough. And you start to question whether or not A&M can pull this off. So this one's a flip of a coin. Maybe Tennessee's ranked, maybe they're not. I'm going to give it to the Aggies. I'm going to go 5-2. That might be a bit of a biased pick, but I got to do it. So, Ole Miss, the Lane Train. Toot toot. I think at this point, if they don't have a recruiting violation by then, I'll be surprised, and so will you. But let's assume, all jokes aside, Joey Freshwater. I can't bet against A&M. They're playing them at home. Jimbo's good at home. He's great at home. And Ole Miss hasn't been very good. And I don't think that Lane gets the rebuilding job done that quickly. I just don't. So I'm going to go ahead and give it to the Aggies. I'm going to say 6-2. And we'll move on to the LSU Tigers, defending national champs. What looks to be one of the toughest games on the schedule. Or does it? Now, LSU, depending on how you measure it, has been a whole lot better at home than they have been on the road the past 5 years. I have to crunch the numbers again, but I believe it came out to 11% better as a home favorite and 17% better as a home underdog. Either way, these guys are winning an extra game or an extra 2 games per year just from being at home. So is this one where LSU slips up? Well, it depends. Have they slipped up at this point in the season on an away game? If they have already, then the chances go down. If they have not, there's a pretty good chance that Kyle Field is where that occurs. The other thing is LSU does not return a ton of talent. Let me rephrase that. They return a ton of talent. They recruit extremely well. They don't return a lot of experience. And the studies show the teams that return upwards of about 75% experience tend to win a couple more games than the previous season. And that's something that Texas A&M is going to do. Now, last season they won 8 games. They're not going to win 10 this year because the season is shortened. Or they won 8 or they won 7. I don't recall. But the point is, they're on the uprise due to their returning production. LSU returning hardly anything, returning the least production in the SEC West, possibly even the entire SEC. I'll have to look at the East numbers again. But LSU has a lot to replace. They have a lot of coaches that left. Joe Burrow is gone. They do return that star wide receiver. He is possibly the best in the nation. I believe his name was Jamar Chase. And he's a monster. I believe they lose Edwards-Helaire, the powerful short running back that gained all those yards for them. Don't quote me on that, but the point is they lose a lot. And I don't know. Even though A&M doesn't get the fans there in Kyle Field, I don't think that Jimbo's home record is necessarily due to Kyle Field being super intimidating as much as us Aggie fans would like to admit. Or would like to think, sorry. I think that it's just not having to play the away games in these extremely tough SEC environments, playing at Auburn or, at Bryant-Denny or at the Swamp or in Athens. I just think it's a lot easier when you're not dealing with that crowd noise. I'm going to give the Aggies the win here. And this might be the most biased pick that I've done. The rest you can probably explain away. And this one you could possibly even explain away due to the returning production. But I got to give the Aggies the W. I just don't think that LSU is going to be the same team. I think there's going to be a major drop-off. I think everyone is going to be pretty surprised in Tigerland. But I tell you this. If they are extremely low on returning production this year, that generally implies that in 2021 they will have a ton of returning production because the numbers tend to flip, right? They go in cycles. So what that tells me is that LSU is going to be extremely dangerous in 2021, and you guys better watch out because they could make another run at the title again in 2021, and I don't think that Saban's going to be ready for them. I think that if they have any sort of success this season, let's say they win 9 games, I would watch out for LSU in 2021. If they win 9 games, not this season, I guess there's a 10-game schedule. If they win 8 games this season, oh boy, the SEC is in for it in 2021, barring injuries. It's going to be a nightmare. LSU is going to slaughter people again. There's going to be a flip of that returning production. As long as they get good quarterback play. Oh boy. Final game of the season, you guys. Last but not least. They have lost this game 3 or 4 years running. I am hoping that Texas A&M wins this game. I am in complete disbelief. It makes me sad just to think about this game. If Gus Malzahn or the referees, one or the other, bails Auburn out with some trick plays or some flags in the fourth quarter one more time, I'm going to lose it. And I work with a bunch of Texas Longhorns, and I'm going to hear it because it's the final game of the season, and it quite possibly, if they're at 7-2, I'm really going to hear it. If they're not at 7-2, I'm not going to care. The Longhorns, it's not going to affect me, yada, yada. But at 7-2, if they lose this game, what's at stake? 8 wins, you could be in the SEC championship this season with the way that there's a huge, completely different schedule. I mean, 2 losses, you could be in that title game if you own the tiebreaker. Now, losing to Nick Saban, you probably don't own the tiebreaker. But even 8 games, you could be in a New Year's Six Bowl. And I think that New Year's Six Bowls and maybe the playoffs will be the only bowls that may end up being played. I mean, there's a very real possibility of that. And so that's what I'm looking out for. I'm picking the Aggies to win this game, maybe by a point. I just think they're going to find a way to get it done. I think this is the year that Jimbo breaks through. I think that Texas A&M is going to become a developmental program similar to Auburn in the fact that they'll be good once every 3 or 4 seasons. They're not going to be with the likes of an Alabama or a Clemson consistency. I think that Jimbo Fisher is every bit the same coach that Gus Malzahn is, or possibly a Dan Mullen over there at Florida. I think they're a once every 4 seasons program. Another guy in the mix with that is maybe a Tom Herman. He's not a guy that's going to win you a conference title every season. You got Lincoln Riley over there owning that conference, similar to what Saban's doing conference-wise. Obviously, national-wise, Saban's a completely different animal. But similar conference-wise, Lincoln Riley is similar to Saban, similar to Dabo. Those are 3 guys that consistently are the only guys that are just always winning their conference. Then you've got your Gus Malzahns. You've got your, Kirby Smarts. You've got your maybe a Tom Herman in the future. He's kind of been, that second-place guy, finishing 3rd in his league. He's finished 4th, 3rd, and 2nd. That's an average for 3rd in the conference. When he finished 3rd or 4th one year, he was really tied. So, you could make the argument based on tiebreakers. He was 4th or 5th or whatever it is, you have to go back and look at those tiebreaker matchups. But we like to say that he finished in the further of those slots, being Texas A&M fans. But he is a great coach. But I think that Jimbo hasn't. Granted, the conference is much tougher. You look at there's Auburn, LSU, Florida, Georgia, Alabama. That's 5 teams that have won a national championship since 2006, I want to say. LSU, Florida, and Alabama have won multiple. Auburn playing for multiple. Clearly, there's a higher level of competition in this conference. But that being said, at the end of the day, you got to play who's in front of you on the schedule. And Tom Herman does that, and he's gotten to the point where he finished second in the conference. Jimbo has not done that. Jimbo needs to finish at least third this year, possibly second in the conference, in order for A&M to say, hey, did we invest $75 million in this guy for a reason? Why did we invest $75 million in this guy? So he's got to go 8-2. That's the end of it, guys. That's the season preview. I like the Aggies going 8-2. I like Jimbo fulfilling what they paid him to do. So go ahead and click like and subscribe if you like the content, guys. If you disagree with me, put it in the comments. Not afraid to have a little fun with the Longhorns fans. Not afraid to have a little fun with the LSU fans who think I'm out of my mind for making that pick. The rest of these, picks in here, pretty solid with. I'm not going to, if an Auburn fan gets on here and says, oh, you're not going to win that game, that's a fair thing to say. That game's a wash. It's a 1-point win is what I'm predicting. So that's not unfair to say that. But if Ole Miss or South Carolina or Arkansas or Vanderbilt fans get on here and they think that they're going to say, okay, we're going to win this game, the likelihood is no. If you win it this year, congrats. You can tell me, I told you so. But nobody's predicting you guys to win going into that game. No one's saying that you guys are going to win going into that game. So you can go ahead and click dislike if you want to, or you can comment. All's fair. But that's about it, guys. Go ahead and click like and subscribe. We'll see you guys next time.